because John Getchy's crystal illness, his hand on the glass here.
Nope.
And you have to be supersonically careful.
Amy, you can't hear.
You can't hear. Okay, that's a problem. We're gonna, first of all, is this not working? This is working. Yeah. This is working? Okay. I know it's working. I can hear it. Okay, so, testing, can you hear me? Okay, terrific. Ambassador Eco is in the house.
He is.
And there must be a chair. Is there a chair for Will? There's a bench in the back.
There's a chair.
Okay, first of all, welcome to the gallery. And sorry for my crankiness, I just don't like flying furniture around the glass. So, we have an amazing conversation tonight on, we have to kill the air. Can we kill the air?
Yeah, it's turning off.
Okay. On Ukraine's rather surprising pivot in recent months. And we have been covering Ukraine as journalists and as gallerists for many years. This is probably our third or fourth conversation on Ukraine issues, and we're getting feedback. Okay. Okay. So again, welcome. That was a squirrel. Welcome, welcome. To my right, my immediate right, is Natalie Jaresko, who is a world-class financialist. And she fixes big economies, big problems, institutional issues, and systemic change. I know this. Yes, we first met in Puerto Rico when she was fixing the Puerto Rican monetary system, correct?
Bankruptcy.
Yes, bankruptcy, yeah. So she's an American-born financialist who also became the finance minister of Ukraine and did a remarkable job there. And we can talk about some of that. Her main job these days, aside from working at EY, is, I was about to say the competitor, is really raising consciousness in finance for Ukraine's defense against Russia's attack. And she runs the Aspen Institute Kyiv, and we're very pleased to have her here. And then to her right is Evelyn Farkas, who I'm sure you've seen on stage and screen a lot. A Eurasia expert, we can say that. Someone who knows the security, the defense, the economic, the risk, ellipsis in this part of the world really, really well. And runs the McCain Institute now, president of the McCain Institute. And we're really happy to have Evelyn. These two women know each other. We all three know each other, and we're friends. So if we start to bicker, understand that it's just friendly fire.
I think we've been forewarned.
I do want to start with you, Evelyn. And I want you to be careful of that fellow in front of you, because I want you to slip on that. Right in front of you. Yeah. There you go. Evelyn, there's so much to talk about, but at this point, and we'll go at it bit by bit. Give us kind of an overview. There's so much that's gone on between Ukraine's become, the drone kid, and also a Gulfy, like a Gulfy wannabe. I mean, what's going on here with their new pivot? And is it reflexive or is it active? Are they doing something to make this happen in a major way? And then we'll get into, of course, Europe and the United States.
Well, see, I speak so loud, I don't need a microphone. Thank you so much, Amy, for the opportunity. It's really an honor to be on the same stage with Natalie and with yourself. For those who don't know, Natalie is a pioneering, I want to say woman, but it's not fair because you're just a pioneer when it comes to turning around large economies in transition or in trouble. And the fact that you remain engaged, obviously, because it's part of your heart and soul in the future of Ukraine is really important. And another advantage that the Ukrainians have people like you and the rest of the diaspora who are engaged and working to, again, ensure that Ukraine is our future, frankly, because this is one of the things that I want to start by saying. This is not something that came out of the blue. All along, Ukraine has been very consciously driving its own agenda, driving its own perspective, ensuring its own future. And every time people tried to count Ukraine out, and if you watch the media, of course, they like to try to make it like a horse race between, Ukraine and Russia, and, is Ukraine down today? I'm always saying, just give it a minute, because the Ukrainians have something up their sleeve. And they're very strategic, and the Russians are incredibly tactical, all the way up to the highest levels in the Kremlin. And we all know here that Russia lost, maybe in 2014 already, frankly, but certainly in 2022 when they launched the full frontal invasion. And Ukraine has been doing everything it can with this very, whether you like President Zelensky or not, he's been incredibly impressive and genius in terms of how he's used communications, how he's used every asset, every opportunity, every threat he's turned into an opportunity. And so what the Ukrainians have done is to say, you want to support us, you can do this. You won't support us, okay, fine, we'll do this. And so all along, the Ukrainians have understood that they can't rely on the United States, even when the United States appeared to be and said we were fully supporting Ukraine. We know that we never were supporting Ukraine as much as we should have. And what Amy left out of my bio is that I was Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, Eurasia from 2012 to the end of October 2015 in the Obama administration. And I can say, myself and my team, we argued very hard for additional and lethal assistance for Ukraine. President Trump then did it, but no president did enough and did it fast enough, and we're still kind of satisficing, if you will. Ukrainians understood this early on. They took what they could, and then they went ahead. So to jump up, sorry, I'm talking too long.
No, you're not. I want to just answer a question on here, because we did spend a lot of time, a lot of effort on Ukraine, at least a lot of thinking. Most of it seemed to be retreating in terms of, are we going to give, or are we going to pull back? And we seem to be pulling back largely in the past 4 or 5 years.
Yes, and the Ukrainians.
So have Americans lost this notion that Ukraine is an important democracy and important to defend?
Let me just finish really quickly just what the Ukrainians did, because I think it's important. Maybe now you will cover it, but over 75% of Ukraine's defense procurement is all now made domestically in Ukraine. Most people do not know that. And if you look just at the drone category, it's 90-something%, okay? And that goes up every month. The Ukrainians know that they cannot rely on anyone, including us. So that's really important. The Ukrainians, we know that they are the masters at drone. We're now, as you alluded to, buying their technology, we, the United States, and the Gulf countries. But in addition to that, the Ukrainians have said, these long-range munitions, we need to make our own. So they have their own cruise missile that they've tested, manufactured, and I think, exactly, they've used it, but I think we're waiting to see how they can really deploy it, because if you listen to the head of the presidential office, for example, who gave his first address to an American audience by video at the McCain Institute Sedona Forum. Anyway, he basically said, stay tuned. So as I said, the Ukrainians are innovating constantly. They have more up their sleeves. So I just wanted to get that in there, just some concrete examples of how the Ukrainians have gone way beyond.
Stop. Thank you. Okay. Now, I want to ask you, you're the financialist. Do you understand this sort of prognosis here? Does Ukraine have what it takes to keep going financially, and does Russia to keep beating it?
So let's start with the very beginning of your comments. No one here should be surprised by what's being called a pivot. Ukraine is continuously moving forward. This is not a pivot. This is the rest of the world figuring it out, having ignored reality for years. This drone warfare is not new.
Ukraine's unsurprising pivot.
And we're not, Russia is not winning. In fact, I would argue that a country with that type of economy with that number of people and the ability to recruit in Africa and other countries as well, and be so willing to throw their people away, literally, into the incinerators, excuse my honesty, but given that, the fact that they have not taken the territory that they dream of, the fact that they have to ask Ukraine to give up territory that it has defended for 12 years, shows you that they're not getting where they want to go. At the rate that they're moving forward, it would take them over 30 years to do what they want to do. So, financially, they definitely outweigh Ukraine. And unfortunately, sanctions came too slowly from the United States as well as our other partners. And sanctions left too many loopholes.
Can you stop there for 1 second?
Yeah.
Because we did have a major conversation about these loopholes with the Nabiscos and all the US corporations who were essentially semi-funding Russia's war by not pulling back as the embargo.
Absolutely.
So where is that now with US corporations, just as a parenthesis?
The ones that stayed are still there, and paying taxes in the billions of dollars. But the bigger loophole, to be frank with you, is in their sale of oil. Russia's economy runs on oil, fuel, the oil being excavated, whatever it's called, explored, and then taxed at the source, at market prices. And so if we don't limit their ability to export, which since the Iran war began, we have waived the sanctions to enable them to sell. And if we don't enforce what we did even before Iran, we weren't enforcing these ships that they basically have registered under some other country. They have no insurance. They are a floating environmental disaster. But we're not boarding them and we're not stopping them. So even if the Finns have boarded one, or other Nordics, they don't actually take the trouble to actually stop that ship from going forward. So they're actually earning more today, more than 4 years into this war, than they were last year. So that part of the economy is horrific, that we're still sitting here today talking about trying to stop the oil flow. The Europeans stopped importing gas, finally, from Russia, but they continue to import oil. The UK is importing jet fuel, we were just listening today, products made from Russian oil, which are being processed in third countries. So they're sending crude to India, or they're sending crude to China, they're processing it and then reselling it as if it's not Russian. So they have money. Their economy is not in good shape because they're spending all of it on the military. It is a defense-run economy now almost entirely. Consumer spending is down, inflation is high, the banking system is not really functioning at that high level of inflation, and the economic side of Russia is complaining.
And where are they drawing the military from?
The money or the people?
The people.
Well, they started 4 years ago with pulling them from their minorities, from eastern, from the Asian part of eastern and southern part of Russia. So they were accomplishing two of their goals, objectives at the same time. They were killing Ukrainians and they were getting rid of their minority problem, quote unquote. After you've run out enough of those people and or you become scared that people in Buryatia or in Dagestan are gonna rise up and start making trouble because so many have died, they moved to kind of recruiting a lot from Africa. And they're recruiting people who don't understand. They're telling them that they're getting a job in a factory, they're gonna be paid X per month. They get there, their passports are removed, they are shipped literally, momentarily to the front lines and often just killed. But the Ukrainian economy, just to finish, the Ukrainian economy is, from one perspective, doing well considering it's 12 years into this war. When the war began in 2014 is when I was minister. The economy collapsed. And it was much less of a war, right, than what we have today. It collapsed because we had poor governance for the previous 8 years. And that president had fled to Moscow, refused to join the EU association agreement. And we came in, I'll call it our third post-revolutionary government. We had 3 revolutions, and we were the first government after the third revolution. And expectations were high, the needs were incredibly big. And we had to pull ourselves together, and we did. We didn't have as much support as Ukraine has today, or has had in the last 4 years. Financial, military, none of it. But what we did have is the desire to kind of kick the past into the garbage can. And so we created a normal regulatory central bank. So when I was minister, 100 out of 300 banks failed. Full-scale war, not one bank has failed, not one. That's the difference between 14 and 24. If you think about the IMF program and where Ukraine is, Ukraine had been through like 25 years, and I was there for all of it, of taking the first tranche and then walking away from the reforms. Then negotiating a new program, taking the first tranche and walking away. So when we started in 14 these reforms, there wasn't a lot of credibility. People were like, well, maybe. Today, Ukraine has shown over the last 12 years that it continues with the reforms, it's continued these programs, and so there's a lot more credibility between the IMF, and the IMF is your good housekeeping seal, so then all the bilateral, multilateral institutions can lend. Ukraine is living today by the grace and taxpayer money of the Western countries.
Okay, going back to Evelyn, because you've
Can I
been,
do an advertisement first really quickly?
no, Evelyn, no, Evelyn.
We're already fighting.
No, Evelyn has been at a security, with many folks at security conferences, but riffing off of what Natalie just said, which is really, I mean, it's fascinating. Where are the sovereigns now on responsibility, accepting responsibility in these security conferences? Where is the thought? Is it?
I'll let Natalie talk about the financial part of it, but I will say, I mean, I was at the Kyiv Security Forum, what was it, I don't even know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and what was interesting there was, first of all, you know, you didn't get to it yet, and I don't know what your ad is, but European Union, you know, is really on the horizon for Ukraine. Obviously, it will cause a lot of tension inside the European Union, but the future of Europe is with Ukraine in the European Union, and by the way, also in NATO. The reality is that at the Security Forum, what struck me when you talk about sovereigns in other countries is that our European allies across the board, and these were people from France, UK, etc., all of them were basically saying to the Ukrainian colleagues, forget the United States, we're with you, we will help you. And the Ukrainians were interesting, just to take it one step further than what I said before. They were saying, yes, that's great, we will take the European help, but also we don't really need either of you. They didn't say that in those words, but the way, where I see it is in where they're striking. So to go back to the defense stuff, they're striking in the rear, they're striking Russian refineries, they're striking in Moscow, not at civilian targets, everyone should understand that. They're striking at these refineries. These were targets that the United States and probably the Europeans, I know firsthand about the Americans telling them not to strike because they were afraid of the price of oil going up. So the Ukrainians are no longer held back by the bad advice, frankly, that they were getting from people that they felt they were dependent on because they're not dependent on us. Okay, you want to read
No,
that?
but forbidding, no, she's not alone. But for, the Americans were forbidding them from using long distance
Long
missiles.
range.
Now they have their own. That's simple.
And long range artillery at certain targets. So, yeah, they were controlling, since they now have their own technology, their own means. Even with the drones, they can get into the rear, and they have their own means. So they don't. And again, because across the board they don't need us as much. Now I will say, because my husband's asked me, you know, well, don't they need us? Yes, they need us for intelligence sharing. At the end of the day, there's no one like the United States when it comes to intelligence capability.
Was there
So
a very,
for targeting, etc.
and wasn't there a very, very tough time when we limited that?
There was a moment when that was shut off, and hopefully that will not happen ever again.
So financially, Ukrainian budget is spending about $50 billion now a year of its own tax and customs revenue on military, leaving the social budget, which is some 25 to 32, depending, $1 billion, which is, you know, salaries of medical workers, teachers. Another thing I want you to understand is that this isn't a Sudan-type war. Services in Ukraine have continued throughout this war from day one till today. Garbage is picked up, school is taught, hospitals are treating, even if those treatments have to happen with no electricity, with the flashlight of a telephone, an iPhone, or you have to teach these children underground in a subway. Government services never stopped, and that is to a great deal thanks to all of you and European taxpayers. Initially, it was a group of European, US, Japan, G7 contributors, and the US was a large part of that. The US has become zero. The US is providing not $1 anymore towards the budget, the social budget, the $30 billion. And the Europeans have picked up 90% of it. So all of the arguments of the past, you're not doing your part, those are past, to be very clear. Europe is
the
doing it.
Japanese some credit.
The Japanese, the Canadians, the UK, and the Europeans. Absolutely. In fact, the South Koreans are supportive. In terms of the military, the Europeans are also financing a great deal of it. They may be buying from the United States right now, but they are financing it. And they're buying not only from the United States. Now, because of what's happened, they're talking about trying to limit the use of their funds for European-made weapons. And there are several countries that are financing weapons production in Ukraine. There's something called the Danish model. Denmark provides the highest level of support to Ukraine on a percentage of per capita of GDP, the highest, small country. You might know that it has Greenland. And they are providing the highest level. A country like Estonia is providing an extraordinarily high level of their GDP and committed to it in their budget process. It's not like, every year you don't know what's gonna happen. So the Europeans have taken over the financing, but they're also starting to commit to production in Ukraine. And I think, that Danish model where they're, agreeing to help build capacity in Ukraine is part of what I think is the future of all of this, joint production. Ukraine being the frontline manufacturer for many European weapons and ammunition.
What about Ukrainian intel and talent and technology going outside?
Well, so President Zelensky made a very smart strategic decision in light of the war in Iran, so we're bringing it in now, to authorize some export of Ukrainian drone and counter-drone technology and capabilities, so systems. Obviously, he did that, instructing his government to be mindful of what they need indigenously, so what the domestic need is for the war. And they are quite worried about export control, meaning not letting the Russians, the Chinese, and others get a hold of the technology. But very wisely, President Zelensky said, yes, let's do this, because it's a way to generate revenue, it's a way to generate partners. So, some of you, if you follow kind of Telegram or whatever, social media, you might have seen like Ukrainian soldiers saying, I'm going to, Doha, so I mean, there are now Ukrainians in the Gulf helping our Gulf partners. And, frankly, that's also a statement in and of itself, because we, the United States, together with Israel, launched the war in Iran, against Iran, and didn't contemplate the second and third order effects, what the military calls branches and sequels. One, sequel to attacking Iran might be that they might attack not us or Israel, but our weaker partners, and that's what happened. So Ukraine, again, has been incredibly strategic and opportunistic all along the way.
We have to break for a commercial announcement.
Oh, can I do a commercial? Yes. Wrote it out.
No, I'm not singing. Oh, God, no. Today, Ukrainians around the world celebrate World Global Vyshyvanka Day. Vyshyvanka is the word used for Ukraine's embroidered shirts, blouses, dresses. And it's a holiday that unites generations, it preserves our traditions, and it reminds us of our Ukrainian roots. My daughter is wearing, my other young, almost daughter is wearing, my friends, you'll see all of us. A Vyshyvanka is a symbol.
How many Ukrainians are here?
Well,
50%?
no, not quite. Raise your
By
hand.
show of hands? Majority, minority.
Yeah, a little bit less than 50.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
A Vyshyvanka is a symbol of Ukrainian identity. It's our genetic code. It's an ancestral memory, it's love for our culture, it's the resilience of our people. You will find today on the front lines, our soldiers are fighting in Vyshyvanka. This holiday was started 10 years ago, not by the government, not by some institution, the UN, it was a student in 2016 who said, we should be proud of who we are. And he asked everyone in school at the university to dress, and it's grown and grown. It is now more of an official holiday. But every one of the ornaments, you'll see these are all from different parts of the country. Every village has its own tradition. It's not just a region, it's a village. Every ornament tells a story. Every, oh yeah, I'm gonna end from. It's a piece of our history, our tradition, and our heritage. So I just wanted you to explain to you why many of us are wearing this today, although it is also in modern history now become fashionable globally. You have Ukrainian designers who are doing designs for queens, the Queen of Sweden. We have seen people on the runways of the Met Gala and other places wearing Ukrainian designs. So it's been brought into the current time, but it also reflects the past.
And all of you look so chic, I gotta say. It's beautiful. I'm loving this one in the front row. Okay, we're going back to the region now. There's a land route now through Syria. We're all over the world with war. We have a number of folks here who are really expert in these various regions, and I want to tap into their knowledge. And I want to ask you just about this, all these geographic changes to accommodate for war. What does this land route mean in terms of Iran, or others getting their oil out, and everybody's knocking on Syria's door now, everybody.
And they should be, because the Syrian government is trying really hard. First of all, the leader has basically, committed to, he's jettisoned his past as a terrorist, frankly. He has committed to, observing international laws. We, the United States, have lifted sanctions against Syria because of what he's trying to do. It's incredibly hard to unite a war-torn country that was torn apart based on region to some extent, and of course, they still don't have a complete democratic transition because it did start with an opposition movement that wanted more rights and more democratic rights from the Assad regime. The reality is that this war, this new Iran war, and the fall of these friends of Vladimir Putin, Bashar al-Assad, Maduro, it doesn't matter how it happens. These changes, also of course in Lebanon, the proxies were taken out. The Hezbollah, not completely, but certainly sufficiently weakened. Hamas also weakened in Gaza. The Houthis are still a problem. But Lebanon itself has a chance for a future. And the Iranian regime, while of course it's holding out, let's not kid ourselves, it is also weakened. So this offers an opportunity for other actors to step in to, maybe take advantage of the situation. Ultimately, right now, though, there's still too much chaos, and we do need a strong power like the United States to come in and really not just make grand statements, but put their butts in seats and negotiate a future. And that's not happening as far as I can tell in Gaza. It's not happening enough when it comes to the Iran war itself. And I'm not sure whether the Syrians would say that we're doing enough either to help them make their transition. So there is a lot of opportunity right now. And this goes all the way into the Caucasus, because on the other side of Iran is Georgia, is Armenia, which is trying very hard and bravely right now to get out from under Putin's boot as well. The Georgians have been unfortunately yanked into the Kremlin orbit, but the Armenians have not. Azerbaijan is a different story, but also obviously independent actor. So there's a chance for all of these, the geopolitics to realign, but we're not there yet.
I want to give one more example of why we should not think about Russia winning right now. On May 9th, there was a very important parade in Moscow. For them, it is the 1 year where they celebrate what they call the Great Patriotic War. The rest of us call it World War II. And they celebrate it in a very militaristic way. And they have a huge parade every year where they show their technology, their tanks, their missiles, and hundreds of soldiers are parading. And for the first time in hundreds of years, let me say, Moscow is afraid of Ukraine. It goes to our ability to reach Moscow with these things. It goes to the reality that Putin is seeing that not the bad guys aren't winning everywhere, and he may not be. He's hiding, literally, in bunkers. He doesn't go to the office, they come to him. And I think that is just the most remarkable thing. It sounds small, but it really is huge. He's afraid of Ukraine. And that tells you everything.
Spectacular point. I'm going to open this.
He's also afraid of his own people. He's shut down internet access significantly. And what scares him the most are the nationalists on the right who have been saying that he's losing. He brought them into a war that they support, but he's losing it.
How strong are those nationalists?
Well, not strong enough to topple him. At the end of the day, it's going to take the security forces around him, the intelligence and military
Another distraction.
security, to say, Putin, we can't do this. You got to go to the dacha, and they'll find a pragmatist. That's the most likely scenario, the easiest one. You're not going to see revolution like people in the streets, I don't think, in Russia, but you never know. If they push it too far, that's also possible, but for that, we don't have the economic conditions right now.
I'd argue that there's also a worst case scenario, that the hardliners replace Putin. The system is very much controlled by the former KGB, now the FSB. He's put in place, and he's destroyed level after level of his military. He's destroyed level after level of the intelligence. He has only people who are extraordinarily loyal to him and who are probably deciding right now how to split it up when he goes. And so I also fear that we think about this as Putin, but I remind you that the Russian civilization has been doing this, leader after leader, with perhaps one exception, Yeltsin, for hundreds of years. And so, he has militarized society. Children are born and brought out of the hospital in little soldier outfits. Their parades in school, they dress up as tanks. He's rewritten all the history books, militarizing history across the board. So he's changed society.
And if you want to see it on Netflix, I think it's still on Netflix, Mr. Nobody, it's so amazing. This one Russian school teacher who documents everything on video escapes and gets an Academy Award. But I do want to differ a little bit with my friend Natalie, because I don't like it when people make it sound like something worse than Putin can come along, because I really cannot imagine anything worse than what Putin has already done. And so I think any hardliners that will replace him will have to be replacing him because they need to be more pragmatic. I just don't, I have a hard time imagining a more imperialistic minded, revanchist mindset taking over after all of this has failed.
Okay,
From your words to God's ears.
Hollis, okay, Hollis. Where's John Strum in the back? Just give us your sense quickly. We have a few folks here who really know their stuff, and John talks a lot on television about this, so maybe he'll give us some ideas. Just give us your sense, if you would, about, we have now 2 major wars going on, and the United States seems distracted, not very capable of pushing through whatever they say their stated goal is in Iran. And then we've got this other major thing going on in Ukraine, and we haven't been very responsive. What has Iran done, do you think? What has the Middle East done to an American feeling about Ukraine and fighting in Ukraine and supporting Ukraine?
I'm not sure I'm capable of answering what it's done to Americans doing it, but I can tell you in part a little bit about what it's doing in the Middle East.
Tell us that.
And I think Ms. Farkas raised this issue when she spoke. The American umbrella, which is why we have bases in Bahrain and in Qatar and the American umbrella is basically is slowly disappearing, which is why the UAE is desperate to get Ukrainian technology. It's why the Americans are desperate to get Ukrainian technology, and the Israelis as well. So I think, and something else that needs to be thought about as we move forward, the whole nature of war is going to change as a result of all of this. I mean, you could argue that in the last 10 years, the American defense industry should be sued for malpractice, because they should have recognized these things coming up as it's going. But when you look at the the Defense Department budget, but we're gonna get rid of a lot of these huge ticket. I mean, we still need it, don't get me wrong, you still need bombers, you still need aircraft, you still need all of that, but the nature of warfare is changed, and the Russians are out of, the ports in Syria, and you're gonna have this whole new, it's shape-shifting of the kinds of alliances that we're going to see.
What's gonna
going
happen in those
forward.
ports in Syria? Seriously, I mean, in terms of what the impact on Ukraine.
The impact on Ukraine.
Well, the Russians have been kind of driven out.
Yeah, the Russians have been driven out, so I don't see a real impact.
You don't see-
But I
No,
don't
go
know whether people heard, so I was trying to.
To encapsulate what John said,
So basically, John was saying that the Gulf allies have realized that we, the United States, are not providing an umbrella for them, and also that the nature of warfare has changed significantly. And then he mentioned the fact that the Russians have had to leave, but I think they're still on one base. I think they still are on Tartus. They left the air base in Syria. So, but the Syrians made some deal with them. And obviously it's an uneasy situation probably for the Syrian government, but they didn't kick them out entirely.
I just want to give you the math behind what happened. The Iranians produced these drones for probably less than $100,000 a piece. And the United States, when this war began with Israel, was shooting them down with Patriot interceptors. Those interceptors cost a couple $1 million a piece. And in 3 months, the US, I think, and Israel, used 800 interceptors, which is more than Ukraine has used for the 4 years of war. Now, it makes no mathematical sense to be shooting down a $100,000 drone when you could do it with a drone interceptor that costs tens of thousands of dollars. That's what Ukraine brought to the table. It brought to the table battlefield data. It's not just a drone. It's an entire ecosystem of sensors, electronic warfare, radar, and the communication system. I urge you to watch Secretary of the Army Driscoll's statement to Congress when he said that the Delta system that Ukraine uses, their control over all of this, is something unlike anything the United States has or has seen. That was one of the first times I've heard someone in the administration make it so completely public. So if you want to talk about who has the cards, I think the Secretary of Army, Secretary of the Army just said it. And that math is critically important. Now, everything keeps changing, but you cannot be shooting these things down with $4 million Patriot interceptors.
And I already mentioned that the Ukrainians are reliant upon the United States for intelligence. They're also reliant upon us today for Patriot batteries and Patriot interceptors. However, the Ukrainians are also on top of that, and they're working to develop their own version of air defense together with some Europeans. I've heard different things, French, German, either way, the Europeans also are part of this attempt to essentially find some cheaper way to provide the function that the Patriots provide. I want to just give a couple of examples
leave time for questions.
Okay, what they do with the drones. I mean, just, you can Google it, or whatever,
Yeah.
not Google it, but AI it. Evacuation from the battlefield. They have drones going in there, robots basically going in and taking people off.
UGVs.
Apparently, I did not see this, but my colleague, when we were in Kyiv, she saw a video that the Ukrainian troops, of Russians surrendering to robots. Or drones.
Very, very true.
I don't know what to say about that. Competing, this is husband and wife, better not go give it to me. Ladies first. Wait, elbowing each other there.
Natalie, you spoke about the expense of 50 billion and 30 billion, and the social services are going along as best as can be. What about the income side? Is wheat still being produced and shipped out? Where's the money coming from to support
Is
that?
wheat still being produced? Is there still a functioning production in Ukraine, aside from?
Ukraine has no navy. To the extent that it had a couple ships, the Russians destroyed it. But the Ukrainians devised sea drones, and they took out the Black Sea Fleet out of the Black Sea.
The Russian.
So the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And so with, again, a much less costly approach than having a navy. Not that we wouldn't like to have one, of course. But they drove the Black Sea Fleet out, and the ports are functioning, and we are exporting. Now, with that said, we're not exporting as much as we used to export. Number one, in agriculture, part of it is, unfortunately, in temporarily and illegally occupied territories. Second, they have mined Ukraine. And even in the territory that we ourselves control, there's enough mined territory, it compares to like the size of Austria. Ukraine is the most mined country in the world right now. Now, if you think about how long it took us to demine Cambodia or something, let's just hope that technology's allowed us to do this much more quickly, both with robots, with satellite and so on. But still, a lot of the land, farmers get killed, they go out and try and demine it themselves, and it goes on and on. And the third element, I would say, is that, we are reliant on fertilizer, on urea, and that fertilizer either comes through the Strait of Hormuz, or it comes from Belarus, and we're not importing from Belarus, which is a party to this war. So all of that said,
Is the land, what's happening to the land?
it's being farmed. I mean, we are still farming and planting and collecting, even with drones raining down on people's heads. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that they constantly target the ports. Constantly. And so it's a constant rebuilding. Everyone thinks about reconstruction of Ukraine when the war ends. No. They are rebuilding every day. A bridge here, a road there, a port here. You cannot just wait. And I'll give you the example of a good company. Coca-Cola had its facility just outside of Kyiv bombed early, 4 years ago, and has rebuilt the whole thing, their bottling facility. So companies, the country, people are rebuilding as it goes along. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a functioning economy. So yes, they're collecting taxes. Ukrainian businesses are operating. Many have moved from east to central, central to west. And many are actually exploring the European market. So you even have like Ukrainian supermarket retail chains entering into Romania, entering into other parts of the EU in preparation for what is going to be EU accession over time.
I have a question, it's random, but I have to ask. What, if any, progress has been made on the disappearance of Ukrainian children?
So, not enough. One way to just say is not nearly enough. The Ukrainians believe that they have documented over 20,000 kidnappings of children. The Russians have themselves announced that they kidnapped over 400,000. 2 people have been indicted by the International Criminal Court, President Putin and the woman, Lvova, that was responsible for implementing the program. They take the children, they remove their last names, they change their last names, they take their passports away, and they brainwash them, and then they militarize them. I want to say again, they send the boys to fight their own people. They force them to go into the military. Now there are a variety of efforts to bring back the children. One of the most significant was being documented by Yale University. Both my girls were there. And Yale was keeping satellite track of many of the children's locations. And when the United States dismantled USAID, the money stopped. And there was a period of time where they lost track because it had to be constant. Now they've raised money from elsewhere, and I think the United States has done a little bit, but several countries have tried to help. First Lady Melania has brought 2 children back. I think the UAE has tried, Turkey has tried to bring some back. There is a global coalition, it's an issue at the UN, but frankly, the longer you wait, the harder it will be to find them and to give them back to their families whole.
And there are organizations, if you want to support them, Save Ukraine, I think, is bringing children, reuniting children. My husband told me this story, because I've told people like anecdotes, so about a young Russian youth who was taken into one of these orphanages, whatever, retraining facilities, and they said, you must raise the Russian flag. So he raised the Russian flag, but he attached a white piece of cloth, like a surrender cloth, and for that he was put into solitary confinement.
The other half, please.
the response and the discussion has so far been very, very positive, and that's wonderful from the efforts that we've heard tonight. What would it take to turn that around? What could happen, let's say, unfortunately, horribly, 3 months from now, that would poke a hole in your minds in what could happen to turn the positivity to something more drastic and much more negative? What is there out there?
I take issue with the positivity comment, because just on the heels of that conversation about children, I mean, there's a lot of unpleasantness here that
Well,
No, I understand what you're saying. We're basically saying that Ukraine is winning, Ukraine will win, but what are the variables? So I think the biggest variables are the outside forces, right? So what would be one variable? Certainly, as I alluded to, if the United States didn't share intelligence with the Ukrainians, although there are commercial and European satellite feeds that they can get. The biggest thing, I think, is probably the role of China. Right now, China is providing incredible amounts of dual-use technology components to Russia. Equipment for their drones, the engines, the chips. These things are keeping the Russian war going, and without this, the Russian war would not be able to continue. So if the Chinese suddenly withdrew that would make it even better. They could, however, make it worse by saying, you know what, we're going to overtly give military assistance. And there is a report I just recently read about Russia and China cooperating on use of drone technology, and that is disturbing because the more the Chinese believe that there will not be any repercussions for them economically, coming frankly from us and the Europeans, the more emboldened they might be, because while they don't really care that much about whether Russia keeps Ukraine or not, what they care about is having a junior partner on their long border with Russia.
And how long is China going to allow Ukraine to be superior in drone technology?
I don't think China has the competition. The Ukrainians and the Russians every 2 weeks are one-upping each other because they capture each other's drones and they capture the equipment and they copy and they improve on it.
It's not like other races with the Chinese on quantum and AI. They're not in this right now.
In fact, the Chinese have never fought this kind of war.
Supporting, if they withdrew the support.
If they withdrew, it would be good. But they're doing the opposite, right? They're sending their generals to the front lines where the North Koreans are fighting on Russian territory, but this is still a fight with Ukraine and the territory that Ukraine temporarily took from Russia. And they're learning about this war on the ground. Because the Russians, you cannot tell the Chinese, from the North Koreans, they're wearing North Koreans.
And Xi
uniforms.
Jinping and Putin are
Just
meeting
met.
right now.
Right. But there are a lot of other risks, so I'm gonna give you a whole bunch of other ones. First I'll say, if you're Ukrainian, logic is not what you focus on faith. Because logic was 3 days and it'll fall. Logic was the US will stop funding and the Europeans will not either and you'll fail. Logic was you're gonna be forced at the negotiation table to give up territory that you control because some administration believes that that's how you get a deal done. Logic would tell you that Ukraine is gonna fail, but we have faith, and we have faith because we've seen them overcome every one of these things, but there are many. So Starlink, for better or for worse, if it gets shut off, and it has been from time to time shut off in a certain area, and it's one person, Elon Musk. So for whatever reason right now, he's being cooperative, but tomorrow he could change his mind, he does that. Second, I think financially we are completely now dependent on Europe. And to the extent that over the next few years we have European elections, and if right-wing parties come into power in France, in Germany, in Romania, you name it, we will start to lose what we need, which is a unanimous European vote. We just got Hungary back, thank you. But that is a huge risk. Even before that happens, there is a financial risk that the European taxpayer is not going to continue to be happy to borrow and to use their taxes for Ukraine. If the Europeans do not turn to using the Russian sovereign assets that have been frozen, there's about $200 billion worth of Russian sovereign assets that have been frozen for 4 years. And, this is a legal issue. I mean, there is a
And what
court.
would what court determines that?
Well, there's a court that no one will pay attention to, and there's a tribunal that's been set up, but right now the Europeans are afraid. So there's a couple different things going on. One is most of the money is sitting in Brussels, in Belgium, and the Belgian government is afraid of retribution. They're afraid that if they do anything, that would in any way kind of be a break of the contract with the Russians who put the money into this interbank exchange, that they will be facing, death, drones, attacks. They're afraid of cyber. They have many things to be afraid of. So they're blocking it. That can be lifted. There's a way to try and move the assets and liabilities out of Belgium to an EU account, but even the Europeans are not always very willing. So the Germans are afraid of repatriation. They've got a historic issue. The Japanese are not thrilled. And people were basically hiding to a large extent over the last few years behind Hungary. Hungary was the one that blocked it officially, and everyone else could just go, yeah, we wish it was happening. But this is real now, because at $50 billion a year, or $32 billion a year for the social budget, even the $90 billion, which is going to be used partly for military and partly for social, is going to run out in 2 years. So that's another big risk. I think shutting off US intelligence, which we discussed. And then the last thing I'll say is, look, I believe there are still much worse revanchists and people in Russia. There are people who, when they feel that they're losing, may do something like use tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And, it may not affect Europe and it may not affect the United States, but we shouldn't be afraid. I know you're looking for, we shouldn't be afraid, because if the Ukrainians are not afraid every day, then we should not be afraid. If they believe that it's worth fighting despite those risks, then it's worth fighting.
Belief over logic.
I don't think it's very likely, though, that anyone
Hold
would.
on, Evelyn, it's 7:35. Let's hear it from the audience. Can we have 5 more minutes?
Yes.
Can we do it?
Just very quickly, I'm just
All
going
right.
to say, I don't think it's likely that anyone would use nuclear weapons. There are a whole host of reasons why.
You can fill that out a little bit.
Well, any government would have to authorize the military to do it. So there are any number of people that you would have to convince that that's a lawful order. The fallout literally would be not just on Ukraine, but on Russia. And internationally, I think it's a bridge too far. It's unpredictable for any government if they were to break the nuclear taboo post-World War II like that. They don't know what the international repercussions would be, including from China.
That's Ukraine.
Yeah, I would like to ask, we have an Ambassador Eco served us in Austria. Bill Eco has, and then I want to ask the Ukrainians about that, because that's actually a very good point. Bill.
I just wanted to ask the opposite of the earlier question. Let's say that the U.S. president woke up tomorrow and had a revelation, I'm gonna go all in on helping Ukraine. And calls up the Secretary of Defense and calls up everybody else and says, we're gonna do everything we can. We're gonna talk about nothing but helping Ukraine, because it'll get everybody's mind off of Epstein, whatever his reasons.
Off Iran.
Let's just say that happened tomorrow. What could we?
Did everybody hear that? Let's say that the president woke up and said,
Let's do
full on for
everything we can.
Ukraine. Right.
What would happen? What could we do?
Oh, we could provide so much more military assistance to Ukraine. We could surge more assistance faster. We could remove all restrictions on use of long-range artillery. We could basically help them take out all the Russian oil refineries. We could put incredible sanctions pressure on, meaning close the loopholes that have now been opened, but also deal with the shadow fleet, these oil tankers traveling around the world selling Russian oil illegally.
If we did all that, could they win?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
We
Yeah.
could have won in
Yeah.
2023.
How soon?
Or 2014.
Yeah.
Well,
And now?
in 2014.
So Bill wants to know now, if you put full court press, how long would it take?
I mean, it could be done. It wouldn't take that long, because once you're routing a military, they're on the run, and then they surrender. So, I'm not a military expert per se, I know the defense policy world, but I think a military expert would say if you have a military route, that could, basically you're losing the war within days and weeks.
Did we want to hear just briefly from our former First Lady? Do we want to hear anything corrective or otherwise?
The former First Lady of Ukraine, Katerina Yushchenko, is here.
Yes.
Her husband was president
Yes.
in
We wanted to correct everything we said.
2004.
Five.
Elected in December 2004. At the Orange Revolution, if anyone can remember.
Well, I would just like to thank you very much for bringing attention to what's happening in Ukraine and to have such brilliant people discuss this. You know, I think that the important thing to realize is that despite the fact that we have these bombs hitting us every day, that we're losing family and friends every day, spirit is as strong now as it was in the first days of the war. Because we have the faith, we have this spirit knowing that we're on the side of good, and a tremendous feeling that Russia will collapse. You know, every empire in history has collapsed at some point. Russia is a very large empire. We work very closely with the different nationalities and the Chechens and the Dagestanis and the Buryats. We know that they're very dissatisfied being in this Russian so-called federation. They are tired of being cannon fodder in Ukraine. They control massive amounts of wealth that they have to give up to Moscow, and I think that it could be a very quick thing, just like it was in when the Soviet Union fell apart. My dream is that it would end not with a bang but a whisper as it did then, because all of these different forces working outside of Moscow would love to control their oil and their gas and their timber and their diamonds and everything else. And so I think that we, just like in 22, when everybody thought we would give up, nobody really expected it. We all knew that we would be out on the streets helping to fight this war because we've been doing it for centuries, and we were going to do it. And right now, you'd be surprised that even in the sense of deep distress and mourning, people are still very confident.
You're
And
hearing
we
this
know we're
everywhere,
going.
the confidence and the, it's a mourning / confidence, it's belief. It's what Natalie said earlier, it's belief versus the common sense or what.
I want to just say something because the former First Lady, her husband, President Yushchenko, for those who don't follow Ukrainian politics, you might remember Natalie mentioned the 3 revolutions. The Orange Revolution was led in part by her husband, who was attacked savagely, and you might remember this, because it did get a lot of coverage in the United States by the Kremlin. They threw acid in his face.
No, they poisoned him
They
with
poisoned
dioxin.
Okay, either way, they disfigured him through their attack. And so, thank you and your husband for what you have done for democracy and for Ukraine. But I want to say one quick thing. We should not be, because the flip side of what the former First Lady said is oftentimes you hear Americans say, oh, you know, Russia can't lose, because if Russia loses, then the Federation will fall apart and there will be civil war. And I think we don't really know what's going to happen. Maybe they'll negotiate something and maybe you will still have a Russian Federation. But what we must make sure does not live on is the imperial notion that those people in Dagestan and Chechnya and Ingushetia and all these other regions, that they don't have the right to determine their own form of government and their future. Sorry, I got emotional.
My last sentence is this. The American people support Ukraine. Doesn't matter what polling you see, Republican, Democrat, Independent, the American people support Ukraine. When you look on the Hill, the US Senate is very supportive of Ukraine. They had some 85 signatures ready for a sanctions bill, but we're told by the White House not to do it right now. That's bipartisan, 85. The American people are about to have elections, and the American people can call their congressmen, their congresswomen, their senators. I urge you to translate the support that each of you has for Ukraine, and I know you do, into political action, support candidates who support Ukraine. I'm sure you're aware that a couple just lost in the last few days. And I urge you to do something to help. Pick whatever topic you love. Restoration of churches, children, bringing the children home, helping the veterans recover, helping the front line, the people who, the grandmothers, the infirm that can't leave the front line and are being brought their last, drugs and food by the local NGOs. Every one of these causes has incredible organizations. Here in the United States, in Ukraine, I'm sure any one of us could give you a recommended list. And I urge you to act because, not that you can see the logic, but if the Ukrainians can keep fighting in minus 20 Celsius, with no heat, no water, no electricity, and it was the hardest winter I ever remember in 30 years. If they can do that, well then we can make a phone call to our senators. If they can do that, we can give some, the amount of money you spent at a Starbucks this week to the veterans. If they can live through this and keep fighting, what can all of us do in our warm homes? We can do a great deal. So I urge you to do something, anything, but do something.
You're here.
That is a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you,